6 years ago, I was on death's door. I literally worked myself to almost death. Not so ironically, this is exactly what my mom pounded into my head was required to be a successful businesswoman in a man's world, quote unquote. First of all, we clearly have an outdated crap version of what success is. Yes, if success only equals money, a fit body, fancy trips, and handbags, then yes, I had achieved success. I had $1 million in the bank by the time I was 30. It took me getting so sick that I couldn't move off the couch, had to sit down to shower, release 90% of my clients, gained 30 pounds in 45 days to wake up to a new understanding of success. Here I spent my entire life obsessed with achieving more, obtaining the perfect body, getting more awards, assets, and money, yet I felt more empty and broken than ever. True success comes from true abundance. When we are abundant, things happen with a sense of ease, enjoyment, and playfulness. There's no forcing, hustling, and pushing needed when you know there's a limitless supply of abundance available to you now. You don't want to be rich. You want to be abundant. This is where you have the health, wealth, worth, and freedom to fucking live your best life instead of sacrificing your well-being for some riches that leave you emotionally and physically bankrupt. I can't wait for you to learn how to start prioritizing pleasure in your life today. And so I don't forget to mention it to you, I will not be taking private clients for quite some time because I'm going to be focusing on some really special high profile projects. So my winter applications for my exclusive 2-month private business coaching program, they're open right now for a really short time. And if you've known you've wanted to work with me privately, wanted that high level support so we can get your business to the next level, we can get it off the ground, we can get it moving and making money and bringing in great clients and have it structured and set up in a way that complements your life instead of takes away from your life, then you can swipe up. The application link is right inside the show notes. Any questions that you have, you can also DM me on Instagram at ProjectME with Tiffany. Just know I take a max of 6 private clients at a time, and this is the last time I'll be taking private clients for a while, so I would not wait on this. If you're tired of hearing the same old basic mindset and motivational fluff talk, you've come to the right show. Welcome to Project Me with Tiffany Carter, the podcast, where we dish on everything from managing that crazy brain of yours to manifesting abundance to my straightforward, actionable steps that will make you major money online. Now, I'm not your typical multimillionaire entrepreneur. It takes a small village to keep my anxiety and depression in check. I'm inherently disorganized with an intense obsession with office supplies. Your girl here is a digital marketing content expert who's generated over $200 million in sales. I promise by tuning in twice a week, you will get a much needed refreshing dose of truth, clarity, and cash-making advice. Now let's get to it. What up, my people, my posse, my fellow crazies? I have designed and specifically brought on this expert for the first guest interview of 2023 because I believe as a society, and especially as women, ambitious women, go-getter women, women who want more and do the damn thing, we're pleasure starved. And it's really not working for us, but we're so conditioned to deprioritize pleasure that it's become our norm. And then we've become almost conditioned that the pain and the discomfort of the push, of the lack, of the setting aside, of the I'll do it later, of I need to get these few more things done is okay and is status quo and is normal. It doesn't even register always in our nervous systems until you have burnout, until you have a health issue, until you're so exhausted, until you have a major life thing like a divorce or something that wakes you up. And this episode is going to wake you the fuck up today because we deserve to prioritize pleasure and just soak in it and marinate in it. But we've got to do some things to get there and let go of some things. So I have brought on, this is one of my clients. And so it's not just me saying this because she's a client. You can go hear it for herself on her podcast or go read her book. Dr. Jordin Wiggins. She is a pleasure expert. And she has helped thousands of high functioning women who do so well in the career part, even the mom part of their life, the fitness part of their life. But then the pleasure side, the sex side, the intimacy side, the true belly laughing, joy filled side of your life sucks. And let's fix this fucking thing. Let's make this something that you're going to do for this year, because when you prioritize pleasure, everything else in your life becomes more abundant and enhanced. And it's not bullshit, because I've been through it. Welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you on for this. First, tell the people, because they hear the doctor and it's like, oh, is she like an OBGYN? Like, is she a psychiatrist? What is she? So what are you?
Thanks for having me, Tiffany. I am a naturopathic doctor by training, and I have spent the last 15 years of my life doing my own silent, shameful research, because I struggled with this myself, only to open a women's health clinic and realize that thousands of women were echoing these problems back to me. So I've been dedicated to the pursuit of pleasure and why it's so hard for women like us and how it shows up in our intimate relationships. Because like you said, we usually have it together at work or in other areas of our life, like parenting, and the one area that we just can't seem to get it right is sex and intimate relationship.
And when people hear the word pleasure, they do automatically go to orgasms and sexcapades. And
which is
and that's not what
and that is
but that's not what
that's part of the problem. And we almost need to do this re-education around pleasure. But that just goes to show, as a society, we've been conditioned away from it, conditioned to think that pleasure and feeling good is bad, because even that word gives people a visceral response or a nervous system response. And they think, like, they almost just want to change the channel or swipe because they think, oh, this woman is telling me to like have more orgasms and that makes me uncomfortable. But that's not what I mean. I mean, pleasure as a lifestyle in and out of the bedroom, pleasure with work, pleasure with our health. We do so many things. And I realized this again in my women's health clinic, where women would run or they would cut out dairy or they would do things that they fucking hated because they thought they should, or they thought it was good for their health, or they read something, but it actually makes us sicker. So medically, and I realized this early with my mental health issues, anxiety and depression made worse by hormones, which is why I went to school for 8 years to become a naturopathic doctor. And I thought I was going to solve the world's problems. I was going to prescribe hormones and just balance people, and it was all going to be good. But I realized there was a bigger problem. Medically, we call it anhedonia. And what that means is the inability to feel pleasure or joy. And that is what I think the crux of the issue is. So and no patients are coming to you and sitting down in your office and saying, I can't feel pleasure or joy. So how that shows up is I'm not as happy as I used to be. I'm not like, I don't laugh, or I used to be funny. I took everyone on this amazing vacation, and it's like I was watching it from a bird's eye view. So this like disconnection, the things that used to make me feel happy don't anymore. Like my soul cycle class or whatever I used to do, like it's not giving me that relaxation. It's not making me feel good. I'm just like numb, or I'm off. And then what the medical system tells people is, oh, well, you're depressed. Here's some medication. But it wasn't solving the pleasure problem.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, I've been highly medicated for a long time. And while I believe that I need to be, because I've also not been medicated, and that does not end well for me. But that doesn't, I mean, it's not like, oh, here's a pleasure pill, although clearly people seek that. And I think that so many of us have this guilt associated with pleasure. Like moms are like, I should be happy. I have healthy, beautiful kids. I have a nice house and a good husband, and I should be happy. And then on top of not having the pleasure, now there's another dump of shame on beating ourselves up around not being grateful enough. And I should be happy, but I'm not happy. And now I feel bad about not being happy, because then that makes me a selfish, ungrateful bitch.
Yes. Because we're taught to accept crumbs, really. Or I say it's like eating the toast crusts off your kids' plates as your lunch. That would be an actual representation of just trying to accept less than you really want. And that shame, that guilt, that I get on calls all the time with women, and they say, but like, is it even real, or should I want this, or
like,
is it possible?
Is it reasonable, or am I like in a fantasy land kind of?
Yes. Like I have the house, I have the cars, my career is amazing. My partner and I are great teammates. Like, is it like, I'm not happy, and we're not like lovers. We're not intimately connected. There's no passion there. But like, is that just a TV thing? Is it a real life thing? And they try and
please answer this for us and myself. Because those of us who were raised in dysfunctional homes, I mean, which predominantly most of my listeners have, I don't know what's normal, or what's, like you said, like TV stuff. Like, tell us.
And that's the biggest problem. And it's one of my biggest missions, is because we've been given the wrong script. We don't really know. We are in homes that there's just been intergenerational trauma dripped on us, and we have soaked in it. And then you try and get together with somebody else who has the same stuff, and in the intimate relationship. And I think this is where some of the shame comes from, because I've figured this out in other areas. I can set boundaries, and I can ask for what I want. And then in the intimate relationship, it is like a magnet. It's going to pull out all of our trauma and all of our shit. So we like to ignore it, or pretend it's not there, or pretend that what we see on TV isn't real, which I don't think it is. And I think what we really have is an intimacy problem and a pleasure problem. If I had to boil it down to just two high level things, because we don't have hours, and we struggle to know what healthy, connected sex looks like in long-term relationship, because what it's modeled for us in porn, it's modeled for us on TV, like, you know, these star-crossed lovers meet and it's perfect, but like, well, then what happens for the next 10 years? Like, there's not a lot of education or not a lot of showing around what real intimate connected sex looks like and what life and intimacy looks like when you're prioritizing pleasure and joy and intimacy, because we're in hustle culture. Like,
tell me this so that we can paint a picture, because we can talk about all these things, but examples are so helpful. So tell us about when you were not prioritizing pleasure in your life. You were living out of pain, and what that, like some examples of like things you were doing or not doing and what that looked like.
For sure. So I thought you get an education and you need to earn money so that you don't need to depend on anyone, was like my takeaway. Okay. And you think you get the degrees and then you open the medical clinic. And I was just working so hard and chasing after these ideals in a medical model that was presented to me. Not because I thought about it, not because it brought me joy. So what that actually looked like is I was working 70-hour weeks. I was seeing tons of patients. I didn't have who I'm telling to eat healthy and exercise, but let's face it, it's very hypocritical at that point when you're working that much. My hair was falling out. I had adult acne. I wasn't sleeping. I was waking up in the middle of the night, sweaty, needing caffeine and sugar to get me through the day. And I was in a failing marriage where we weren't intimately connected because we were both chasing these ideals, both chasing these boxes to check.
And did this feel in some way like normal to you? Like, I guess this is what adulting is. Like,
I remember this, and I was in my late 20s at that point, or early 30s. I can't even remember. But I remember thinking like, maybe this is it. Having that exact question that we were just talking about. I have the car. I've got the house. Like, I've got the check the boxes. Like, maybe this is what it is. And it felt so hollow and empty and out of alignment. And I didn't feel seen or supported or cared for. And it was also because my focus was off, right? Like, I had my armor on, and women will tell me all the time, like, I put on my suit and it's like my suit of armor. And those protective mechanisms, because intimacy by definition, like, into me, you can't be connected with somebody when you're only sharing parts of yourself or what you think they want to see. And you can't have great connected sex from that place either. Like, somebody needs to be intimate with all of you in and out of the bedroom to feel truly seen, truly cared for, truly supported. And that's what I think everyone's chasing. It's not the house, it's not the car, the degrees, the titles, the number of times you have sex. Because that's another thing. We'll have like check the box sex. Like, you do it to do it. You do it because it's been a long time. You do it because you know each other and you know what's going to get each other off. But there's something missing. There's this piece. There's this unfulfilling void there.
That's when I would leave the person, though. So that's why I said, like, my addiction, my drug of choice is a freshie high. So I would do the 2, year and a half, 2 years, like
the new relationship
all y'all
energy.
Are getting married, okay? I had some engagements and shit, but I was doing the year and a half, 2-year program with the United Nations because I was like, oh, well, it's not working now. I'm not feeling that, because what I thought was pleasure was the lust, if we want to call
dopamine,
it that.
Norepinephrine, the new relationship energy cocktail.
I love that.
And when you are, I love it too. And that, like, the trauma that makes you love that Trust me, that was my negative choice.
Wow. That shit was wild. I couldn't be alone. Like I was after that next high. And I really thought at a certain point when it kept being, like I said, the United Nations, right? Like at a certain point, I wasn't an idiot. I was in therapy. I knew I was the common denominator. But I then went, because you hear people say like, well, human beings aren't meant to be monogamous for life. And that's why the divorce rate is 70% and blah, 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 blah. And then you hear in the corporate career I was in the pharmaceutical world, which you're very familiar, heavily male dominated. And most of my clients, right, they're all doctors and a high majority are still men. And they would complain about their marriages and their wives and they're not having sex and they've been together so long. So I thought, well, is that just what it is to be in a relationship? Like to be in a long-term relationship, like people are just like miserable and not happy. Like, I don't get it.
There's this level of settling and it goes back to do we feel like we deserve pleasure and we deserve a connected, intimate relationship? What I see is people will leave at that point. And had I known what I know now and had the tools and the skills from working with thousands of women and testing these theories and having these conversations, it's really just that we don't how to do long-term connected relationships.
Because how do you know if it's the person you're with, the partner? I mean, obviously we have both sides of the streets, but how do you know if it's the partner and that's not going to be possible with that person, or if it's my own shit?
So first of all, I want to say, like, I am not advocating for anyone to stay in a relationship where there is abuse and like people are getting hit. Like that obviously is not okay. Going back to that magnet and like drawing each other's trauma out, what I see happen is those are our lessons. Those are our things to learn. And you have to have each party, I think, if we were going to kind of give it a litmus test, or how do you know, is each person willing to work on themselves and work on their shit? Sometimes, majority of the time, I have women coming to me and they're willing to work. They're like raising their hand and they're saying, look, everything you're saying is resonating. I've tried therapy. I've tried podcasts and I've read all the books and like just the sex and intimacy stuff out there. It isn't working for me, but everything you say resonates. But my partner doesn't want to do shit. They don't want to do a thing.
Exactly my situation.
But the space that can be created when one person does the work and when one person learns to prioritize pleasure and joy, and we can create space and we can come from a loving response when somebody else's stuff gets triggered, and then you do it for them and it feels so good. So then they kind of like take stock and go, oh, and they start doing it for you. They decide that they need therapy on their own, right? Because we're not controlling anymore. We're not telling them what to do. We're not telling them the therapist to see and scheduling the fucking appointment. We're letting them do their thing.
I feel very called out.
I know because I've done it myself. And like, this is severe. This was a severe situation with I got my divorce, got in another relationship quickly, and decided, like, when the same pattern started coming up, it was like, oh shit, this is me, right? It can't be all the men. Like, this is me. This is my work. This is what I need to do. And when you are focused on performance and achieving, and you don't know how to trust yourself and your nervous system doesn't feel safe feeling good because you've not been raised in an environment of pleasure and joy and butterflies. Like, we can tolerate the shit out of pain and chaos. That we know how to do.
It's very familiar.
Very well.
It's familiar. There's even a inner drugstore high that comes out of the chaos, right?
Yeah. And when it gets good, then we'll fuck that up. We'll just throw it out like, oh, well, we'll pick on something. He didn't do that a 10 out of 10. That was a 3 out of 10. That must mean he doesn't love me.
I notice this even with my clients, do this with their businesses, where they'll say, oh, I started my podcast, but no one's still listening. I sold 50 spots in my group coaching program, but it wasn't the 75 that I told you I wanted. It's like the nitpicking, the not allowing ourselves to celebrate and notice the good even in ourselves. We do it with our partners. And that is, in my opinion, and I'm making an assumption here, is that an example of what you mean by how we basically shit on pleasure and deprioritize pleasure?
Exactly. That all or nothing extremist thinking that if, when you do the presentation at work, you kill it, or you got your targets for the year, for the quarter, but this one little thing went wrong, and we're obsessing over that, and how that translates into, it erodes intimacy and connection over time. Because I'm always saying, like, you can't take your CEO into intimate relationship and the skills that made you successful at work, in business, in life, because we live in a society that prioritizes those masculine, penetrative, hard, rigid rules, how to get things done. We don't know how to soften and open and let people in. So I'm asking, can you celebrate? Can you relax and enjoy? And this could be during sex. This could be having a tea and staring at the ocean. Or is it the crazy train in your head? Is your nervous system freaking out that you're not doing? Can you be? And can you take a compliment?
The old me, and I've done a lot of work around this. Oh my God. I had to earn a vacation. And then I was so exhausted once I took the trip but it took me days to sink into the trip. And then a day before I'd come home, I'd have anticipatory anxiety of the pile of work that came back. Another example of self-shitting on pleasure, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And how does one think I showed up energetically, whether I was single and traveling with a friend or traveling with a significant other? I'm sure, which version of Tiffany was more fun to be around?
And I see it. The trips is a perfect example, because we're not getting out of that stress response, that sympathetic nervous system response. Because to feel pleasure, we need to be in that parasympathetic, grounded, rest and digest state. And so many of us aren't there. Me, with my medical clinic, working the 70-hour weeks when I had that health stuff going on, that was overwhelm. That was burnout. And the pleasure centers in our brain are turned off. So if we went to the yoga class and it didn't feel as good, it's probably because we're not able to drop in. If our partner comes up to us, tries to touch us, and we want to swat their hand away, or we have this get away from me visceral response because we're in fight or flight. And if we were running from a bear, or like our body's trying to keep us safe, that's not time to have sex. That's not time to rest and arrange flowers in your garden, it's time to run. And when it's hard and it's foreign, and that's a lot of what I'm helping teach women do, is how do we tolerate more pleasure? And it sounds insane to
that
say
we would
that.
have to tolerate it, right? But it's uncomfortable, and there's so much science around it. It's uncomfortable to be in ultimate pleasure. I noticed this with myself, and that's where I say luxuriating, and I came up with that, and this is my own way of. And when I look back, how did I get to where I am today? I built a tolerance to pleasure over time where I stay in it longer and longer. I mean, 5 seconds of being in pleasure was very challenging.
Triggering. Yes.
Because I went, I'm not safe. Something's going to happen. There's a price. Because how I was raised was, you get something good, whether it's love, you get a pair of jeans, you get attention, there's a price to pay for it.
Yes. Yes.
And I was like, I don't want to pay that price.
We're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that's what our nervous system is on high alert. It's like, where's the snake? Where's the bear? What's going to happen? So even when we're having sex in that state, and I guess, I don't know, I always bring it back to sex, but it's like, I find it's a good mirror, because what's going on in the bedroom is a mirror of how we're approaching life. Like, the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. And how can you actually enjoy sex if you're in that nervous system state where your pleasure centers, like that dial, is turned down? So some people even say, everything you says resonates, but we have sex and I can orgasm. Because there's a lot of women that they can't relax and receive pleasure on that level. They shut it down. Their body shut it down. But then there's people that are having sex, but it's like armored sex. Like, it's not open and intimate sex. And that's the kind of pleasure we need to learn to tolerate. That's a kind of intimacy that we need in long-term relationship to keep it connected, exciting.
Those of us who can say, I get what you're saying, but I don't feel safe, and my partner doesn't like abuse me, but like, I don't feel seen and heard and adored and cherished by my partner, whether it's male, female, non-binary, whatever. I don't feel safe or cherished or adored or desired by my partner. So why would I open myself up to pleasure? That sounds very dangerous.
It's super dangerous. And I've been there and felt rejected in my first marriage, where it was like, what's wrong with me? Am I broken? Am I not attractive? Why does he not want to be intimate with me? And there's this, because and I find, and this, people have their opinions on this, and especially feminists, and I had to reconcile this with myself, that when I was in my CEO energy or my masculine energy, two people can't be in a relationship. So if you're the planner, the controller, you're leading, you're telling them what to do. You're telling them that if they load the dishwasher, they didn't do it correctly, or you're not happy with the gifts that they buy you. That's all work that we have to look at and do on ourselves, and then see what happens to the relationship. Because, and I'm a strong, intelligent, like passionate, driven woman, and all of those things are amazing, and I wouldn't change it, and it's protected me, and it's gotten me where I am, and I can help so many women now, but it wasn't working intimately.
Okay,
It
so
wasn't getting me the
I know
love.
this is what's coming up for me. It's coming up for my listeners. It feels like then I would have to be fake. Because I think we're being inundated on social media with feminine, masculine energy. And feminine energy means rubbing period blood on yourself and howling at the moon and showing your
Talking
nipples.
to your vulva in a mirror.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. And just being okay. My partner didn't follow through and take out the trash or do these other 3 things I asked. And it's okay, honey. Let me give you a blowy tonight anyway. It sounds like I would have to be someone I'm not or fake to be in that feminine space, but it could be that I'm coming up with a version of what it means to be feminine.
Yes. And that's why I had resistance and I hated it. And even as this was starting to come up and I was seeing it as the path to the pleasure, to the intimacy, I was having all of these gross feelings come up myself because it's, what do you mean? I have to relax, let go. Like all of those words were giving me these gross feelings inside. So I totally get it. The way that I explain it and teach it is having different tools, having a different set of tools. So just for example, the trash. Demanding and commanding. It's totally different energy to like demand and come from lack and be like, you didn't take out the trash, or like, well, shit, now I'm obligated to have sex now, even though I'm fucking resentful about the trash. We are getting more honest, more open than ever, and sharing vulnerably how that felt for us, for him to not take out the trash.
Let's just role play, okay?
Okay.
Because I want people to be able to walk away and start like building this tolerance for pleasure within yourself. And like, if you are in a partnership or, you can practice this. Okay. So you're my partner.
Mm-hmm.
And you come in, you're from work, whatever. And like the 3 things that were very fair and reasonable that you agreed upon, doing in a timely manner were not done. Meanwhile, I had done 15 things and held up my end of the bargain.
Because as the overfunctioners, we attract the underfunctioners.
Okay. Yep. And so there's a resentment. So I just set like the stage. I love a good.
So if we're in a relationship and it is not working and there's the resentment, the one thing that we can do to shift it is find your gratitude, your loving energy. That's like, love is feminine energy. For the teeniest little minutest thing that they might have done.
Okay.
And sometimes,
okay.
Sometimes that's hard.
Tell me if this works. This is deep. Okay. Cause what I want to say is, and have a chip on my shoulder, like, so when were you going to do, which is not good. I could maybe find some compassion. Gratitude's a little bit of a stretch. I could maybe find some compassion in my case, in this example, knowing my partner truly does have ADHD. And it is a genuine struggle, and give him maybe a little bit of grace and compassion for that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Or find one thing that you're grateful for him. And sometimes even these dynamics are so sticky that I have my clients energetically send love to their partner, because if they're going to open their mouth, the venom's going to come out. So in your case, with this example and what you're saying, I would have you say, babe, when I come home and the trash isn't taken out, it makes me feel unloved, not supported, not cared for. The or like the story I tell myself is. And we go vulnerable and we go open, and it is scary because that's feminine. The CEO would be like, what are your action steps? And that's penetrating. That's masculine energy. Feminine energy is like the rose petals, like it's a flower opening, and we're exposing our delicate petals, and we could get hurt. It feels safer to stay tight in a little bud. So that's why these things feel risky, and it almost needs to be feminine led. We lead with the desire, we lead with the feeling, but that's what I mean. It's commanding, it's inviting energy. It's not demanding, telling them what to do, penetrating.
Because even if we're doing it and we're not in a relationship right now, but really, when I think about it, it's also how we're talking to ourselves, right? Like, how are you talking to yourself? Are you being demanding and commanding of yourself? Or are you
do you
listening?
give yourself grace and flexibility? And it is 100% a mirror. And that's where it's our internal work. And when we start opening and softening and going wide instead of like deep, penetrating, harsh. And now all of a sudden our men have these flowers to protect. They're wired to protect and provide. And when they can see how it hurts you when they don't, and when they can see your true, genuine gratitude when they do, because then when they do take out the trash, then the next thing is, well, what about the other two things on the list, motherfucker? Then the resentment is still there. And that's our shit to process. And we need to work on that, and we need to digest that. And that's part of the tools and stuff that I'm talking about. Because it's not really about the trash. It's about the story that we're telling ourselves about the trash and the meaning that we're ascribing to it. But when we can start getting in that loop, then the speed at which it heals relationships, and it's more fun that way too. Like, especially when we're practicing with physical intimacy and sex.
How does that look like in the sexual department? Because when you've been operating as a woman in this more rigid masculine space, the reality is this isn't a light switch, right? This is a process, right?
It's it's the pleasure muscle. We got to go to the gym and work it out.
How does it look when it comes to sex? Because I know this is random and I don't know why it's coming up, but I'm curious what you have to say. So, the series that was super mega popular, the franchise that probably made $1 billion, 50 Shades of Grey. The reason I feel that was so popular with women is it's like we have this desire to have the man be like dominate us and take so much charge that we finally didn't have to fucking do anything and we could just receive. And we were forced, basically, in a healthy sense, right? Forced into receiving, and we didn't have to be responsible and do any of the things. It's like, what does it look like to start practicing that in a partnership where the dynamic was like two masculine energies?
I have a podcast on that, like what 50 Shades of Grey has to teach us about intimacy. I do. And it was one of my top listened to episodes.
Okay, I'm going to link that in the show notes, you guys.
Yes. And actually until recently, when I posted one about retiring your husband, and that's the title, but the point was women in their masculine and how it erodes a relationship and what to do about it. I can't stand when
I hear people saying that, by the way. It really makes me rash.
And young in business, seeing these women do it and talk about it as if it was this
publicly
bragging chip. And also, do you go for it? Love your success. But what is that doing to your relationship? It's like inherently almost disrespectful. Like, men don't go around being like, I retired my wife.
I mean, listen, I'd be open to it, man. I'd be
Yeah,
really
and
bored, but
that is, I think, the main takeaway of 50 Shades is we want to be cared for and let go of the reins and let someone else take charge. But in order to do that, we have to find safety and security in pleasure and like in ourselves and in our own feminine energy, because it feels so foreign.
Something that we can start doing even in the sexual area? Is that something we can start working on ourselves first without our partner being involved?
Yes. Going slower, slow down, whether it's making tea, showering, putting lotion on your body, self-pleasuring, partnered sex, going slower and like actually feeling, because we rush through sex and we don't let it feel as good as it possibly could, especially when our nervous system states aren't where they're supposed to be. But just slowing down in and out of the bedroom is a huge way to practice.
When I hear like the feminine in the sexual department, what comes up for me is like, I need to go like buy fancy lingerie and bake a cake and like whisk around the house and like flirt and bat my eyelashes and have no problems and no stress. Is that what you're talking about?
No. And because there's so many facets of the feminine, like the dark feminine, or I'd explain it like the ocean and the waves crashing is the feminine, and the men are the rocks, the container. And sometimes it's like a calm day in the ocean, and sometimes the waves are crashing in and it's a stormy day, and we are like cyclical by nature and with our hormones and our stages of life and creating life. That again, we ascribe that all or nothing thinking to the feminine. And it's not that it has to be one exact way all the time. But as you soften into it, you might feel like flirting again.
Give us an example of what this version of you does in the bedroom, where the old version of you would be like, wouldn't have even crossed your mind.
She would be focused on her pleasure and like truly allowing herself to either be led or truly allowing the focus to be on her and finding new sensations and letting it be slow and take time. Because that's how you're building newness in a long-term relationship, because we still need that. We got the oxytocin, we got the connection, but we still want those little like dopamine hits and excitement. So, because when we're in our masculine, it's that checkbox sex. It's, I know what's going to get them off. I know what's going to get me off. I know, I read these tips on how to give a better blowjob, because like we're high achievers. So like, we're doing the things, but that's us present, like in our mind sex. That's not us like embodying sex. And when my clients say, I just had the best sex of my life, it's always after like we spend the day together, we have a retreat together, we do this work where we're opening our hearts. And as a vulva owner, like we're opening our pussies too, in a way that we're relaxed and able to receive.
Wow.
Not from the doing, not from our head.
I mean, there's so much here that obviously, like, and this episode is designed to get you thinking and starting to practice this. But what Dr. Wiggins has coming up is she's doing a 3-day live series on the fundamentals of pleasure. And that link is in the show notes. And you should for sure sign up for this so you can go deeper into this and start really strengthening that pleasure muscle. And if you're like, God, I can't bring this to my partner, he or she is going to think I'm crazy. They're going to be resistant. They're going to feel da, 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 da. It sounds like what you're saying is, no, this work starts with us.
Completely. And we work on the scripting and how to bring it to them. But the fascinating part about it is once we're in that, like once we learn these tools and we do the work, then it's just happening. And a lot of the scary conversations that you think you need to have, you never even end up having to happen. It just, that connection, that human nature, it just happens.
This is where you guys hear me say all the time, the more fun you have, the more money you make, the more pleasure, the more abundance. I would have thought I was a nutcase, like if you told me this 5 years ago, but it's actually true, because what's more attractive? The cunty, rigid, resentful, angry, seething version of you, or the lighthearted, carefree, that version of you? What's more attractive in general?
Yeah.
Right?
What do you want to be close to? Like, what energy draws you in and invites you in?
When I'm cunty, I literally can feel people being repelled by me. And I don't have to say a word. Men, women,
yeah.
I'm talking animals, everything.
The dogs on the street will run away from you.
I think women's energy is so powerful, more than I think some of us want to realize. You don't have to say a word, and energy can't be faked. It is felt in that household, isn't it?
Oh, I have a podcast episode on that about, we think we're good fakers, but you can totally read the energy. Completely.
You guys
agree.
have to listen to her podcast. That's in the show notes. She also has a book. Your book's called The Pink Canary, right?
Yes.
That's a great name. I love that. What is one thing that this woman we're talking to, one small thing that she could do every single day that's not going to add hours to her day?
Oh no, we need it in minutes or less.
Right? Like, in order to build this pleasure muscle.
And this is something that can be so simple, but so monumental with the shifts. What is one thing a day I can do to feel good? And it could be drinking tea out of your favorite mug. It could be sitting, like moving your laptop to an area where the sun's shining in. Like, just what is one little thing that I could do to make me feel good? And if you can do that every single day, the add-on to that would be, what can I say no to or eliminate that doesn't make me feel good, that drains me, that takes me further away from pleasure? But even if we just focused on one little thing a day, after a year, that you're training that pleasure muscle.
It's so true. Without having known your work previously, which I wish I had many years ago, I have been doing this, and it really does work, where like, when you say the word pleasure now, and me even saying it and watching it come out of my mouth, even saying it, I don't have any visceral reaction. But the old me, when someone's like pleasure, I was like, or even playfulness, playing. Oh God, it was like a full body cringe. So I want to give you guys the example, like, Dr. Wiggins has been through this. I've been through this. Like, it really does work, and it really is possible, but it's like a little at a time.
Yeah, doses. We microdose our pleasure around here so we can tolerate it.
There we go. So we don't put our hands up and reject it and shove it away.
Yes.
Like we don't need to do that. Thank you so much. This was like, I know that if my head is kind of spinning, but like in a good way, it's like processing. It's processing. Like this is a pretty big concept.
It's huge. It's heady. And I mean, I'm complicated. I like it. I like it. I like tackling these complicated.
Yeah. And I mean, and I know that you guys are definitely like, wow, this is a lot, like not in a bad way. So just lean in a little more, take time to digest this, come back and listen to this episode again, then go listen to some of Dr. Wiggins' episodes. Like, you know, you don't need to like binge unless you want to. It's okay. But like, take some time to really absorb it. Like pleasure has to be absorbed. It has to marinate, right? Like, how do you make a really juicy piece of meat? Is you let that shit soak in those juices, right? That sounds really, I must be hungry.
Me too.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your heart and your wisdom. And thank God you're doing this work. I'm so grateful for you.
Thanks so much for having me. Tiffany, you had me at Gucci boots and dick jokes.
Well, there you go. I got someone with that. If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a 5-star review on iTunes. Not only will this make me super happy, but it will allow more listeners to find our special show. Simply help me help others.